off because I'll strangle myself with it. Our first guest has an insane amount of IMDb credits.
First guest?
Well, first one for me. Yeah. You're the first
like
one.
9 people lined up behind the sign.
Well, as somebody who's, all right, well, we'll start. It's Phil LaMarr, kids. The very first time I got to know your work was actually not with Pulp Fiction, not with any of the myriad of voiceover stuff that you did, but through the first 5 years of Mad TV.
You know that was after Pulp Fiction.
I do. No, I missed.
But you were too young.
No.
That's Devin like, I'm so young. I couldn't get in to watch it. But I would sneak downstairs when my mom was asleep and watch Mad TV.
And it was the scrambled feed. Like, is that a boob?
That was a different show you were watching.
Entirely different show. That was Mad TV. The Nicole's.
No, that was. Did anybody see
She TV?
She TV. No, there was a post from the con, and they on my credits they misspelled Pulp Fiction. With a U in place of the first I.
Oh no!
So maybe that's what you were watching.
It might have been. Because everything has a porn parody with it.
Parodies have porn parody now.
Exactly. Porn parodies have porn parodies. It's nuts. First off, thanks for coming to Dallas and thanks for spending time with us this week.
Thank you guys for having me. Thank you guys for being here.
I'm curious where when you were first starting out in acting, before Mad TV, before
when I was just at home acting a fool.
Sure, exactly, like any of the rest of us. But did you see your career going in a certain direction? Did you think, I want to do stage, I want to do TV, I want to do film, or was it just, I just want to act and get out there by any means necessary?
I just wanted to make a living. And in fact, that's my goal for Monday. I just want to make a living, because it's something no one tells you, but making your living as an actor is a moving target. Just because you do it today, this month, this year, doesn't mean you're going to do it next month, next year. There's no guarantee. Like, all of us, even at the highest levels, are glorified temps. Like Tom Hanks, he does a big movie. Forrest Gump, last day of shooting. You're out of work. Go find another job. Fortunately for him, he's at a level where it's like, well, I guess I'm gonna go produce myself. I'm gonna give myself a job. Those of us who don't have that clout, we have to go get back on the pavement, start pounding it, find the next one. You know? And that's, somebody asked me, like, what's your favorite role? And, it's weird because I've been really, really fortunate. I've gotten to work in a bunch of incredible fandoms with amazing creators. It's like, wait, you want me to pick? Am I gonna pick the Jedi? Am I gonna pick the Samurai? The Green Lantern? It's like, but then I realized, my favorite role I've ever had is the next one. Because that means I'm still working, and I just might make my rent.
Because you're working on so many different projects from day to day, week to week, and so forth, what does a normal week for you look like?
It varies. Actually, it's funny, because I was thinking about this. People always ask, so what are you working on? And in animation, that's a really tough question, because there's a huge lag time between, when I record something, like last week, nobody's gonna see that for 9 months to a year. So when somebody asks me what I'm working on, what they really mean is, what were you working on a year ago? That I can see tomorrow. And so I was going through my calendar saying, what was I doing a year ago? And I looked back through the calendar and I realized this time last year, I was going through the single worst work dry spell that I had had in my career. mean, I think maybe a couple of years in the very beginning when I was still working a day job to make a living, it had been this bad, but not since the early 90s. And I just looked through my calendar, it's like blank, 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 blank. Audition. You know, and then I got to this year, and I think last week I had 7 jobs last week. TV animation in particular, or voiceover in general really, is a cool little world because it's the only place where a union workday is 4 hours. And it's the only place in show business where that exists. And that's mostly because back in the 50s, when there was just like 6 guys doing all the voices. You know, you had Dawes Butler, you know, Don Messick, Mel Blanc, you know, they were doing all the cartoons. So all the cartoon companies were like, hey, do you really need Mel all day? Because we really need this Huckleberry Hound cartoon to get done. You know, and they're like, all right, Warner Brothers, how about this? Why don't we give it, instead of the 8-hour day that the union says, why don't we just make it a 4-hour day? That way you guys can have Mel 9 to 1, and then he'll move over to Hanna-Barbera for 2 to 6, and he'll still be done in time for dinner. And then after the business exploded with cable in the 90s, remember Nickelodeon? 24 hours of cartoons. All of a sudden there was a lot more jobs. We all had the benefit of those guys' work. It's like, oh, so a work day is 4 hours. I can work 2 jobs in a day, you know? And that's, when things are going well, that's sometimes more, you know? So.
When you have to go away from a job, whether you go and you cut your primary piece for voiceover, whether it's animation or video games, and they bring you back in to do either redubs or they re-edited a certain piece or they added more dialogue for a certain character. I work video as well, but I don't think a lot of people understand how important a producer is in something like that, where they have to basically bring you back into that headspace. Have you had one of those gigs where it takes longer for you to find that specific headspace for a character in coming back?
Not really. Honestly, for me, coming back generally is easier because the first time you do a cartoon, unlike what Mrs. Doubtfire taught everybody, you don't stand in a movie studio with the cartoon up there and move to the lips of the cartoon. It doesn't happen. Only Robin Williams does like that. What really happens is you record the voice first, then that sets the timing. Because the thing is, think about it, you can't animate a character talking until you know how he talks. Is he saying, I'm done with this? Or is he saying, I'm done with this? 2 different mouths, right? So we do the voices, they start animating, 9 months to a year later, they may have some changes. Oh, there's a thing that changed in animation, or we realized it didn't work, or we needed some more efforts here. When you come back, you're looking at almost a finished cartoon. To me, that's so much easier than like looking at a piece of paper and trying to imagine, what does this guy look like? What's he doing? Like, oh, there they are. That's what he's doing. Sure, I can voice that. That's easy. And thankfully, it's all recorded. So if it's been 9 months and you don't really remember what the voice sounded like, they can play it back for you. Although there have been times, I think there was at least one time where I came back in and they played something back and I'm like, that's not me.
I think I saw that because there was in your massive CV there was additional lines. I'm trying to remember the bloody character, but I just thought that was really interesting that it was. Oh, I'm not going to look it up. It'll take too long. But they brought you in. I guess the primary actor wasn't available at that point, or was there? I'll drop it. We'll come back. Talk a little bit about working with that first Mad TV crew, because there's so many insanely talented people that were involved in that cast, and I'm curious what bowl sessions were like when you're figuring out, okay, I've got this character that I've done in stand-up. I've got this character that I pitched for a film and never happened. So what was that experience like when you're in that room with those people at that particular point in time?
It was fun. It was a lot of hard work. It was interesting because there were a bunch of us. Most of us had never really been on TV before. And when they have you audition for a sketch comedy show, they say, okay, you have 5 minutes. Give us 3 original characters and 2 impressions. Go. And so you just have to stand there and put on a little 5-minute show. Now, the funny thing was, I had already done a pilot that year, a show that we're hoping was going to be a show. Basically, it was like a half-hour comedy about a police department with Carlos Mencia. And I thought it was so funny. I'm like, I'm set. This is going to be the next Barney Miller. I said, oh, they want you to come in for this sketch show for Fox. I'm like, I already have a job. Well, you can just go in what they call second position. I'm like, fine, whatever, okay. And so I just had my characters written down on a sheet of paper. There were people I saw in there with like bags full of wigs doing costume changes. I'm like, that's too much work. So I went in relaxed. And we wound up, moving on to, they have you do like 3 or 4 auditions. And the last audition is on the Fox lot for the network. And you're standing with a bunch of sweaty, nervous actors in a hallway. Artie Lang had just flown in from a stand-up gig in Houston. It's like, I don't even know what I'm doing here. And so we're all just sitting there, and they had us go in groups, and you walk into this, not a stage, somebody's office. Just a bunch of, it's like, okay, here, move this couch over here, then you guys will stand here. And so you're crammed in there with like 15 execs, and about 3.5 feet away from you is one of the producers of the show, Quincy Jones. He's sitting right there. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, then you start getting nervous. But we got it all together. We were doing the show, and it was fun. Some really talented people. I mean, that original cast was Mary Shear, Nicole Sullivan. Actually, Brian Callen came on after the pilot. But Dave Herman, Artie Lang, Orlando Jones, so many really, really funny people. And, some of us had characters that we had already done. And so whatever they saw you audition with, then you had to try to write it up into a sketch. But, of course, they would not let us officially be writers, because then they'd have to pay us extra.
And that's another union issue on top of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's not a union issue, that's just a cheap producer issue.
Well, there's that.
I don't believe there's technically a cheap producers union.
That's called the Producers Guild.
And so, yeah, the writers generally would come up with the sketches that were like, a concept, like, what was that one, I don't know, there's just like there's a sketch like here, here's a customs service where we're trying to make sure people aren't hiding things up their butts, That was actually a sketch. And then the sketches that were, usually built around a character, like something with the UPS guy, whoa! Those would be like ideas that most times would come from an actor. And so you guys we just hammer it out. You work together for about 3-4 days. That's where I learned collaboration. And I learned, especially in comedy, the one thing you never say is, that ain't funny. Saying that to a comedy writer is the equivalent of aiming a gun at somebody's head. It's like,
Or point the middle finger.
you don't have a microphone, Tommy. Do you know why? Because you ain't up there, motherfucker! Sorry. But no, it was a tough job. And as you saw by the number of people, the really talented people who came through there and didn't make it. Taron Killam from SNL, he was on Mad TV first for 4 weeks. He doesn't have it. Really?
Was there something that you might have pitched or whispered in a writer's ear, can we draft this, that never took off, that you would love to see take off now?
No.
Everything wound up on stage or wound up on screen at a certain point.
Everything good.
Yeah. And some stuff.
Well, no, because it was funny, because third season, my friend Alex Borstein came on the show, and she was just starting out, she was so excited. I was in my third season, I was burnt. She's like, oh my God, so Phil, is there like anything you're just dying to do that you haven't gotten a chance to do yet? And basically that same question, I was just like, nope. I guess I'm done. It's time to go. And really, sketch comedy, I always say, is like baseball. If you get 1 out of 3, you're headed to the Hall of Fame. Because most of it sucks, just by definition.
Sure.
But thankfully, you guys don't remember the sketches that suck, because they're only 3 minutes long. You probably went to the bathroom during that one.
If you had the resources to be able to put everything online in sketch form like SNL does now, do you think that cast would have stayed together longer from being able to keep those characters out in the public eye more than...
Longer? Dude, the show was on for 14 years.
Yeah, but...
How much longer do you want it?
I understand you were crispy at that point. I just saying... I look at the way that sketch comedy is disseminated now,
right,
where it has a life years after the bloody sketch airs, because the actor takes off, the character resonates at a different point. So all of those things, I think Mad TV would have benefited from more so now than
right,
in the early part of the
90s. Maybe. The thing was, the show had some good stuff, and some people saw it, but it's breaking through the clutter and getting people to stay up late enough,
Yeah.
But no, you're right. Right then, we were held to whoever was awake at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night and had Fox. I remember when we first came on, there were a few times I would tell people, like, oh, I'm on a comedy show on Fox. Like, Fox? Yeah, we don't get cable. Really? That's cable? But you're right. Now you have an opportunity to get something seen, if you can get enough people to seek it out, get through the crowd.
And find a tastemaker that says, hey, watch this, and it goes viral. Are there any questions? I wanted to have a crowd mic here, and I don't have a stand, so I would say, we'll start here.
What, Brad?
What's up, man? Did you ever, did you ever use any of your sketches from Mad TV and brought it into the voiceover industry? Like, did any of those sketches fuel your voices?
Not really.
Not really?
I'm trying to think. No, because, the sketches, for me, is an idea. Like, what's this sketch going to be about? And for voiceover, I'm coming in, somebody else already has the idea. I'm just trying to, bring the character, one of the particular characters they got to life. So in terms of, like, you never really did a voice for, per sketch. Although there have been times where I thought that maybe something similar, to the UPS guy. This character could sound like that, but I don't know. Does he? I don't know. But it's also that thing of like, well, I don't want somebody, and the producer doesn't want to hear somebody else's character in their character. So a lot of times you wind up having to, seek out new ground.
Also, I have a request. Could
No.
you read Ezekiel 25:17 to Samurai Jack?
No.
Read it from there?
I'll give it to you.
We'll come back.
All right.
I saw it here. Yep.
Sorry. First of all, sorry I was late because I couldn't find the panel. Secondly, so obviously you do a lot of voices that are near and dear to a lot
No,
of
just
people.
two.
No.
I just did Beast Boy, man. What are you talking about?
So my question, I guess, Virgil was one of my favorite characters from Static Shock. And then
The name's Static, and I put a shock to your system.
I know you're doing the Twisted Tunes thing, and I watched online because I'm obsessed and saw you doing a Michael Jackson impression and realized Virgil and Michael Jackson are pretty close in voices.
Really?
A little bit.
I mean, you're thinking that, yeah, I mean, there's something like this where it's, a young kid, but that's completely different than this. Because I never had a childhood. Or electrical powers. At least not that anyone knows.
Did I see a hand back here? I did not. Sir, up here.
How do you like your manwiches made?
Here we go.
See, you gotta ask a question where I could say, my manwich! I like them on a bun. Why are you asking me that?
Was the return of Futurama something?
Which one?
Exactly. Every time they would resurrect it from the dead, I mean, I think Family Guy only had more resurrections at that point. But when your agent would call and say, they're doing Futurama again, was it a surprise to you, or did you realize at that point that the fandom would not let the show go?
No, actually, Family Guy was only canceled twice. Futurama came back 3 times. Yeah. Don't check me.
No, certainly not. No.
I lived, man. You wasn't in now. But no, it's always a surprise because the actors are the last ones to know, And really, I mean, it is about the fandom. Although I still don't think that the executives really get, the difference about love and engagement, as opposed to just, they're chasing money. They looked at the DVD sales of Futurama and they said, wait a minute, isn't that the show we canceled? We left money on the table. Get them back. But that said, I think eventually, it's funny because when Futurama came back after being canceled, that didn't happen. I see a couple of us old folks out there who remember, like a show you loved, got canceled, gone. It's like they erased the tapes. Firefly, right? Yeah, it was never to be seen. No, see, Firefly even came back as a movie. Most shows...
In a different studio, no less.
Right.
Yeah.
But most shows, you never saw them again. And so for something to come back, wait, they're doing new episodes? Not even not like a spinoff. This isn't like, the Sanford Arms. There's nobody that old out there. Coming to join you, Elizabeth. But nowadays, shows come back all the time. But that was like the first time. We're like, really? Although, the weird thing was, when Futurama first came back, it didn't really come back. They had us do 4 straight-to-DVD movies. And then they told the writers, but write them so they can be cut up. Each movie can be cut up into 4 episodes, so we can put it in with the reruns. I'm like, wait, what? Which is so funny. Nowadays, dude, just make another season. Somebody will buy it.
And it doesn't even have to be the 26 hours now. It can just be a limited run. The movies would work, and it all binges the same.
Right, exactly. Although I do have to say, when Samurai Jack came back, I took a back from the past. 14 years had passed. I took a really perverse pleasure in watching people who had been binging stuff for years suddenly have to wait 7 days every new episode. And it was hilarious because after every episode, people were like, I'm going online and I'm going to try to guess the next 9 episodes. It's like, dude, go to work. Live, come back Saturday.
My fiance does the same thing with Game of Thrones right now. Yes.
So, from acting to voice acting,
Same thing.
A lot of people don't realize you did a few episodes of Big Time Rush for Hawk. You were a villain. You were the guy who dressed up as a Hawk and Hawk Records, dude.
Yeah.
And plus, not to mention, also Tara Strong was actually a teacher at the hotel. Also, when it comes to that, it's just going from being an actor. And that was the same thing, but having to being able to move and
Just
everything.
say voice acting and face acting.
Voice acting.
See,
face
it doesn't sound so glamorous when you call it face acting.
acting. It's just like.
But yeah, the on-camera stuff versus the voice
yeah,
stuff.
being in a booth and speaking into a microphone. Like, how do you prepare yourself for all that?
The question is, how do you prepare for a voice role where you're separated from the rest of the cast and just relying
necessarily.
on most of the time? I mean, when it's 5 or 6 people in a round robin studio, that's the rarity, I would think.
It's become less common, but it used to. I mean, especially in comedies, you know, and the stuff that's like every Futurama episode, we always recorded. We still all record together, you know, because the writers, they can't know if a joke works until they hear the entire scene together, you know. I think, you know, obviously with a video game where it's all just cut up and put in, you know, after the fact, it's not as important, or at least they don't see it as important. But, you know, really, the difference between on-camera stuff and voice stuff is just, it's the same difference as, you know, working on stage versus shooting a movie. The job of taking a story and bringing it to life for an audience, that's the same. It's the technical stuff that changes. You know, like when you're performing on stage, you don't have a microphone. You have to project. But at the same time, you still have to let the audience know what the character is feeling. But you have to do it in different ways. You use your whole body, you know. Whereas in a movie, camera's 6 inches away from your face. You don't want to make all this. It makes people uncomfortable. Are there things under his skin? Why is his face moving so much? You know, and the same thing with voiceover. You have to tell a story. You have to, you know, make the audience feel something, but you can only do it with your voice. I remember one of my first times I was doing a cartoon gig after spending, you know, so many years doing on-camera stuff. I did a line. They said, "Okay, do it again, but make it angrier." You know, and I did the line again. And they're like, "We're gonna play that back for you." Played it back, and I realized it sounded exactly the same. I just made an angrier face. Like, oh, right. You know, because when we're here in person, we're reading all this stuff off of ourselves, but you have to do that all through the mic. And it's weird because you figure out ways to like, okay, well, if I'm talking to you, what would make it sound like I'm angrier? I said, if I'm talking to you, what would make it sound angrier? See? Something like that. You grit your teeth, or, you know, one of my favorite directions is give it a little mustache. You know, I mean, what makes something sound more mustachy? I mean, what does that? Does it sound like somebody with a mustache? It kind of does. Why? Because it sounds sort of like hairs coming through, you know, but you get all these little elements. The same way on stage, you figure out, okay, how can I, you know, and on camera, you have to. I remember working with John Travolta on Pulp Fiction. He had such a keen camera sense. He knew how the camera saw him and what that was communicating to an audience. So it's like, oh, and he would make adjustments, either physically or ask them to make adjustments, because he knew. And then when they would do it, it's like, oh yeah, that's so much better, you know, because that's what he had learned over the years. Right here.
Yeah, when you have an iconic character like Hermes or Samurai Jack and then it's over, is it hard to leave that character behind, or are you looking forward to the next one?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's always hard to be out of work. You know? And whether something's iconic or not is a matter of time. You know, that's about how long has it been out there, how much people have responded to it,
Right.
You know, which is usually so much after the fact. I mean, I don't go into a booth and go, all right, today I'm going to be iconic. Because
You do that every day, though.
There's no control.
Right.
But it's interesting because we have no control over that. I mean, that's the writing, that's the animation, and frankly, you guys. You know, if you vibe with something, if you really dig it, then that's the feedback loop that makes it, really special. I mean, there have been a lot of shows I've worked on that I put just as much work into it, and y'all didn't like it.
Have any of them surprised you? Like characters you thought may not be big that ended up being really popular?
I'm not sure. Well, I mean, there's some that you usually have a sense that something is like fun, and then there's others that are just sort of like culty, and they're not really that popular. But then, like 10 years later, somebody like
Bulby! From Jimmy Neutron.
Oh, yeah.
Bulby wears some giant space rock.
like, really? Although that just cracked everybody up in the booth. So it was like you knew that was fun and funny, but who knew anybody would pay attention to it? And most people don't.
Right here.
Thank you.
So reflecting on that hunt for the next job and the next gig, when you go through those long dry spells, I can only imagine it hurts the ego a little bit. So what do you find keeps you motivated and keeps you like optimistic that your career is going to keep going and everything's going to be okay?
I have 2 kids. So there's really no option. It's like, all right, I quit. I'm just gonna go dig a hole. But I don't know. Maybe it is ego. I don't question myself as much as why did everyone go insane? But also, everything has ebbs and flows. It's the ocean, not the tide. That's what you got to focus on. And for me, I'm just happy to be able to do work that I enjoy. And sometimes, it's a show that's not that great, or it's people that, it's like, oh, okay, well, the check is gonna clear, right? But sometimes you get lucky and you get to be part of like really magical stuff. Some of it you don't get to see. I just wonder if I can talk about this. I worked doing stuff that I knew would never be seen. I helped, they were doing some concept stuff for The Mandalorian. And Dave Filoni, who was the creator behind Clone Wars, asked me to come up and just do some voices for stuff that they were testing out. It was just stuff so they could practice and show executives, like, this is what we're thinking. And then, we all knew that eventually they would just bring in the live action cast and stuff. But to be in on the ground floor of like a new realm of Star Wars, I mean, that was incredible. And then they erased it.
So one of my favorite characters that you have done is Green Lantern in the Justice League series. And I was going to ask a question about how it feels working with George Newbern and Kevin and Susan Eisenberg and that whole cast. But I think the question that I really want to focus on more was, what was one of your more fond memories as far as episodes like Hearts and Minds or the episode with the Manhunters? Which Green Lantern story really shone as far as what you could do behind the microphone?
I mean, working on the Justice League series was just a joy, start to finish, because I'm an old comic book head, and to be able to play in that sandbox, the original DC superheroes, that was just a dream come true. I think that maybe Star-Crossed is probably one of my favorite storylines, just because as an actor, you dream of getting a role like that. This is a storyline in Justice League where Green Lantern and Hawkgirl have had a relationship, but it turns out, we discover in this storyline, that she has secretly been planted on Earth as a Thanagarian agent, and now, I think unbeknownst to her, they are planning an invasion, and she has to choose her native planet over the man she loves. And so you're playing planetary invasion, and betrayal, and broken heart. Oh, and plus she's seeing this other hawk dude. So kiss my axe. That one really, like from an acting standpoint, was so much fun. But as a comic book dude, I love the Manhunter episode because, and I talked to the writers about this early on. Like, how come he never charges the ring? You know, because I'm a comic book guy. Like every episode, every comic, Hal is on the on the lam. But the thing was, they said, yeah, this is a cartoon. If you actually, in a comic book, that's one panel. In a cartoon, they got to stand there. It's basically like you got to animate somebody charging their damn phone and talking about it. It's like 1%, 2%, 3%. But they said the only way we're going to do the oath is if we can find a way to make it dramatically viable, and they did. Because Green Lantern had to absorb the entire power of the central lantern. And so for me, like to be able to say that oath and have it mean something, as opposed to, I'm just charged up.
In brightest day, in blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern's light!
Were you wearing that ring the entire time? You were just like slipping it. Okay. No, I didn't even see it on. It was like, that is magic right there.
I summoned it, Devin. It's a matter of willpower, man, that's all.
I have no doubt of that in my mind. Right back here.
Is it weird to sing while doing a voice, like Futurama, sometimes you sing Terry's? It's like an awkward thing to do. Same pitch.
No, actually, because I'm not really a singer, it's far easier for me to sing in a character voice than my own, because then you can focus on the voice. The problem was Ken Keeler, who wrote most of the musical episodes of Futurama, is a mathematic genius. So none of that music's simple. It's like, no, it's da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, oh, okay. Can't really hear the difference. Plus, you're in there with Katie Seagal, who, like before Married with Children, she sang backup for Bette Midler. You got Billy West. Billy is an amazing voice artist. He is an even better guitarist. So I'm like, oh God. All right, But I mean, it's also, fun because you get to lean into the when I was young, just a little boy in Kingston Town. So you try to get into the character part of it and hope the notes hit.
Is there a project that, because your CV, like we said over and over again, is really, really vast. Is there a thing that you want to do that you haven't had the opportunity to do, whether it's face acting, voice acting, or the rest of it? Is there one gig where it's like, you tell your agent, look, if this thing comes across my desk, don't even call me, just book me for it?
Actually, that's interesting, because most of those have less to do with being an actor and more to do with being a fan. Because I was a Walking Dead reader, and when I heard the series was being made, I literally called my manager and was like, if you see anything, actually I didn't say see anything, because I knew the characters. And at that point in the series, early on, there was one black dude. Like, well, they ain't gonna make me Michonne, so, can I bring my voice up?
Yeah, but how'd you look in dreads is the question.
Exactly, I look great in dreads. Is Corey Payton here yet?
Yes,
He looks in dreads.
Yeah.
But no, the thing was, I was hoping to get an audition for it and didn't, but then again,
But there's 9 Walking Dead series now. You could get on any of them at this point.
Now, yeah. But now, gotta move to Atlanta.
At least they have incentives there. I saw another hand over here. Yeah, right here. Yep.
Big fan. I know you voiced Bam from Metal Gear Solid series.
5 today.
I'm wondering
or
why I
rather
never really
6.
hear that voice other than that series. Why have I never heard Vamp again or Vamp's voice later?
Because that's Vamp's voice. Why would I do that voice somewhere else? No, it's a really particular sound. You know, when we were working on it, they described, well, he's a vampire, but maybe not really a vampire, and you know, we want sort of an Eastern European thing, but no specific country. We don't want the Transylvanian sound. You know, it's like, so there's a lot of what he wasn't. So I decided to focus on, okay, what if he is a vampire or undead in some way? What does your voice sound like if you don't have to breathe? So I tried to take as much air out as possible. And it becomes this, my queen. With you be the one to finally finish me. You know, and there's not a lot of characters that need that breathless, creepy vibe. You know, plus also, like I was saying earlier, you don't want somebody's new character to remind people of somebody else's old character.
You wind up pigeonholing yourself at that point. And
well, yeah. But I mean, the truth of the matter is, there are people like my friend Chris Summer, who has such an incredibly distinctive speaking voice, but with her acting, she makes each character distinct. And that was actually something that I had to be taught in voiceover, because I used to think it was all about changing your voice. It was all about being a chameleon. There was an episode of Samurai Jack, which, you know, a lot of the times it was just me and Mako Yumatsu, who played Aku. And you want to talk about distinctive voices. You know, Mako had that voice. All the texture, plus the accent and everything. But it wasn't just his voice I learned. It was his acting. Because there was one episode where they cast him as another character in the episode. And I remember looking at the script and going, are y'all serious? Everybody gonna know it's Mako. They go, I mean, does this character turn into Aku later? And they're like, nope. I'm like, okay. And I literally thought Gendy was being an idiot. But then Mako started playing this other character. And he doesn't transform, but he played the character in a completely different way with a different accent. And I was just like, oh, right. We're actors! Good thing I've been doing this for 10 years. And it was literally like taking a master class.
Right here.
Yeah, speaking of Samurai Jack, I want to know, how did you feel about the finale of season 5 and how it ended?
It made me cry. The end of season 5 of Samurai Jack. And it's interesting, because I've had people come up to me and say they were unhappy about the ending. It's like, well, yeah, because it's sad. You're not supposed to be happy about something sad. But I want to be happy. It's like, that's a different show. This entire series has been about sacrifice. Every time in the original four seasons, when he had a chance to go back, finish the mission that he was born and trained for, he gave it up for someone else. You know, oh, there's a portal here, but this person, they need it for their life. Fine. He always sacrificed, and he never got back home. Never got back to do, you know, to save his parents who were enslaved. He always gave something up. And so, to me, it made such dramatic sense for the way that he finally was able to do the mission that was really what his entire life was about, was through the sacrifice of his only love. Spoiler!
You haven't seen it, sorry.
Right? And to me, like, a happy ending would have been weird, you know? It would have been like the end of Sopranos. He's like, you know what? I'm gonna not do crime anymore. Here, let's take all this money and go start a business. We're gonna start a deli and live happily ever after. What? You know, it just, that is an ending, not the ending of this show.
Phil, it is an absolute gas having you here this weekend. Thank you so much for sharing your talent with us over the years, and I look forward to the next 500 credits from you on IMDb. The amazing Phil LaMarr, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you guys so much.